So this is a new series I'm trying out, Civics in the Spotlight. These are short videos looking at current headlines through a civic lens. Not everything fits neatly into my other playlists, but some stories still matter, because they tell us something about how democracy works, or how it doesn't. I came across this story about a week ago, and it's summarized here that the Trump administration plans to overhaul the IRS to investigate left-leaning groups, particularly targeting billionaire George Soros and the Open Society Foundations, according to a report by the Wall Street Journal. And my first reaction was, oh boy, that's not good. When I brought it up with a few friends, I noticed something. The second I said the word Trump, everything shifted. Nobody argued with me, they weren't defending the story, but they just kind of waved it off. And said things like, well, yeah, of course he'd do that. That's just Trump. And I realized they weren't hearing what I was trying to say because I wasn't talking about the man. I was talking about the idea. And the idea is dangerous no matter who's in power. And then I realized something else. Some of these basic democratic principles, they're not really being talked about anymore. Not clearly, not often. And maybe that's part of the problem. This channel isn't about telling you who to vote for. It's about laying out the civic foundations that actually hold this stuff together and asking whether we're paying attention. So let's zoom out for a second. Why do most Western democracies separate tax collection from politics? Because of one of the oldest principles in representative government. No taxation without representation. Imagine someone knocks on your door and asks, hey, how much money did you make this week? And for some reason you tell them. And then they say, cool, I want 30% of that. You'd probably say, no, and rightfully so. But that's basically what taxation is, just with one critical difference: consent. Well, I mean, not really. It's illegal not to pay your taxes, so please pay your taxes. But the general idea is that there's a civics agreement underneath it. That in a democracy, we tax people through the systems they voted for. The people deciding where your money goes are supposed to be elected. They're supposed to reflect your community, not just rule over it. That's what makes taxation legitimate. And it's why any breakdown in that process matters. That's the whole point of representation. You vote for someone, or at least your district does, and they decide on taxes, services, and budgets on your behalf. That's what makes it fair. That's why the power of the purse belongs to Congress or Parliament. Because if unelected people, or politically motivated actors, start deciding where money goes, then we're not operating in a democracy anymore. We're just paying tribute to whoever holds power. And this isn't just theoretical. In the US, residents of Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rico pay taxes, but don't have full voting representation in Congress. That's still a debate right now. In Canada, the Ontario government recently passed legislation capping public sector wages, saying it was necessary to deal with deficit. The courts struck it down, and suddenly some commentators started saying, wait, shouldn't the government have control over its own budget? That same phrase popped up again: taxation without representation. It's not just a slogan, it's a warning. That's why this IRS story matters. Even if it doesn't happen, even if it's just floated as an idea, the very notion that a government might repurpose its tax agency to investigate political opponents, that should set off alarms. And it's not even unprecedented. In the Ontario government case I just mentioned, it was the conservative outlets that sounded the alarm, arguing that courts shouldn't have the power to interfere with government spending decisions. Why? Because they saw it as, sorry to say this again, taxation without representation. That phrase came from the conservatives in that context. And in the US, conservatives have been furious over even the appearance of political bias at the IRS. Entire movements, like the Tea Party, were built around that kind of fear. So the fact that this isn't getting the same pushback now, That's not a partisan failure. That's a civic one. Again, this isn't about who's in power. It's about the system itself. If we start letting the people who collect our taxes also decide who's politically acceptable, we're not in a democracy anymore. That's not left versus right. That's not about Soros or Trump or any other name. That's just a bad idea. And as someone who actually likes democracy, even when it's messy, I think it's worth calling that out.